welcome back to Tallboy Radio. And if you've sort of lost track in terms of where we're up to, this is actually episode number 62. So thanks to all you guys for, if you've been with us from the start, thanks for continuing to listen. Just before I introduce the topic of the week, obviously it's me, it's Gaz. I'm in the driving seat this week, so I'll introduce my two regular co-hosts, and they're going to give us any shout-outs and let us know what beer they're drinking. So, Adam, do you want to go first? Any shout-outs, and then what beer are you drinking?
Yeah, just the one shout-out, really. I want to give a shout-out to our buddy Shiner in Oklahoma. Obviously, you know, he doesn't talk too much about his troubles and his travails on their podcast, the Tiddy and Shiner Show, but you know, those who know. And obviously, at the moment, he's going through chemotherapy, and it is sort of taking a bit of a toll on him. So there was no Tiddy and Shiner Show episode last week. Hopefully, he's still finding time to listen to ours, so we can give him a shout out and wish him all the best from the guys here at Tallboy Radio. In terms of the beer that I'm drinking, you guys know I've mentioned it many, many times on here. I am a big fan of Titanic's Plum Porter. And whenever I see a Plum Porter, which isn't very often, then it's not a common beer, I like to pick one up that I haven't had before. So this is another Plum Porter. It's 5.5%. I don't even see that. It's from Eam Brewery in Derbyshire. So Eam, if you're familiar with it, is the plague village. And it's called Montpesson's Calling. And Montpesson was the rector in Eam at the time that the plague hit, and it was him who decided to. It was basically him who invented quarantine. So the guy's got a lot to answer for. Though to be fair, what he did that time was pretty goddamn decent of him. And I've got to be honest, it's not a bad one. Is it as good as Titanic's? I'm going to say no, but it's a pretty good beer.
To be fair, any Plum Porter that you drink probably won't match up to Titanic's, because I know you love that beer.
I love that beer.
Andy, any shout-outs, and then let us know what you're drinking if not?
Well, I think I'd had a few innuendos in that few sentences he just said, like plums and erectors and all that stuff.
Rector, not erector. Let me make that very clear.
I'm on the old Luke Lloyd Beavertown. Nice. I probably had a few too many tonight, but in a toy TBR glass, and I'm loving it.
Brilliant. So I've just got one sort of specific shout out. I mean, obviously, general shout outs to all those people that retweet us and stuff, but I'm going to give a shout out to Vron, one of our regular listeners, listens all the time, gives us some feedback on the episodes, and gave us some nice and positive feedback on the 80s sort of TV podcast. She said loved it, brought back loads of decent memories, mentioned a couple that we'd not sort of mentioned, and then actually told us, I think we were sort of trying to figure out what was the actor's name that was in Airwolf, and she sort of messaged me and said it was Jean-Michel Vincent was the guy in Airwolf, and as soon as I read that, I was like, yeah, of course it was. And she also mentioned that it was Philip Michael Thomas that was Tubbs in Miami Vice that was alongside, was it Don Johnson or whatever? So, and then in the text, she then mentioned sort of the adventure game, sort of 3-2-1, treasure hunt, proper old school, all of that sort of thing. Was it Ted Rogers? Was it 3-2-1?
Ted Rogers.
Where she basically went that absolutely none of the clues make any sense whatsoever, and they pay absolute no comparison whatsoever to the actual final solution. So big shout out to Vron. I will be mentioning her again slightly later in the podcast, because she's actually given us some sort of content for tonight's program. But big shout out to Vron. And I'm drinking a good old fashioned TBR favourite, which is a Duvel out of, again as normal, TBR merch. And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, What the Fudge t-shirt that I'm currently sporting. So this week, basically along the lines of the last couple of weeks, really, we had a chat and we wondered whether or not perhaps working in sort of chunks of 2 or 3 episodes might work. So we've done 80s TV, we've done 80s film. So this week we're going to be talking about 80s music. So I'm just going to throw it out there, really. Sort of memories and albums and songs. I'm going to throw out sort of videos, that sort of stuff. So was there any sort of 80s album who so I'm going to throw that out first. You know me when I'm in the driving seat, couple of questions. So we'll just throw it out there. Start talking about various artists, albums. So who wants to go first? Sort of add, is there anything, a particular album maybe from the 80s that influenced you in?
Well, I think the thing is with 80s music, for me, it falls into two categories. Number one, you got music that was released in the 1980s. And then number two, you've got 80s music, which was literally, for me, I always think of it sort of really cheese on a stick stuff. Basically, if you're out, you've had, a few beers and you end up in Reflex or wherever, like Flickers. Was it Flickers in stuff?
Yeah, was it back in the day? Was it Valentino's or whatever it was as a nightclub back in sort of Hanley or whatever? You'd be like, oh my days.
Yeah, but wasn't there an 80s bar called Flickers as well?
Was it Reflex? Was in Newcastle? I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, Reflex is a chain, isn't it? There's quite a few of them. I used to go to the one in Preston from time to time. Actually, that's if you like that kind of music. and truthfully, I don't. But when you've had a few beers, it does take me back down this memory. So I'm going to start off by mentioning some. I'm not a fan of that 80s music, but there is one album, and if you're watching on YouTube. This is the vinyl version of it. There you go. Look at that. Nick Kershaw, Human Racing. And just out of interest, I had that haircut very, very briefly in the 1980s. The hairdresser did it for me. Andy's looking a bit stunned by that statement. The hairdresser did it for me. And I just couldn't maintain it. I couldn't get it to. I nearly said I couldn't get it up. I couldn't get it to look right after I'd had it done. And gee whiz, so I had to just give up on it. But again, I think we mentioned this when we did the music episode. Not a fan of 1980s music style per se. However, I always did like Nick Kershaw, which falls very firmly into that cheesy 80s music. But again, if you listen to some of his music on that album and his other album, which I'm also going to hold up now if you're watching on YouTube, The Riddle, another absolute gem, which I will, I've got the week off work, so I've got the record player out later, so I'll be getting on Kim's nerves with these once we finish recording. Absolute gems and really, really good tunes on there. Human Racing particularly. Again, you can tell by the title, it's quite a clever play on words, I think. Absolute gems. Probably Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me is the most famous one from there. I think that's the one that everybody will know. And it's a bit cheesy, but it is a real upbeat classic of a song. Were you guys fans of Nick Kershaw at all? Was it just me?
Yeah, just you. To be fair, yeah, I mean, to be fair, The Riddle was it. There's a stream by a river. There's a hole in the ground. There's a strange kind of something going round and around, or whatever it was. Was that the lyric? I think. But yeah, I mean, look, he very much fell into that. I say sort of. I know he wasn't necessarily, but like that Stock Aitken Waterman sort of production factory of just sort of, I say cheesy 80s sort of pop music as such, and it's funny because when I was messaging Veron, she said she hated that, proper just hated 80s sort of Stock Aitken Waterman, anything like that. She was like, anything to do with just that Hit Factory and stuff, absolutely loathed it. I think she was more of a I suppose an alternative 80s. But she literally said like 5-star she hated and all the Britpop. She also mentioned that she hated Madonna and Prince and Wham sort of thing. And actually one of the questions that she said she suggested I talk about is actually songs that you would literally turn off straight away. So on the songs that you'd love, it's like songs up from artists that you would literally just turn off. And she mentioned sort of 5-star Madonna, Prince, Wham. Couldn't even listen to it. She said just like horrendous. Couldn't listen to it. So, so that was where sort of she was coming from. But Andy, I know obviously 80s possibly wasn't your era, but is there anything that sort of sticks out in your mind as such?
I have two thoughts on the 80s. Like one is like I had a few years growing up in a pub, so obviously there was a lot of music playing there, like Meatloaf and stuff like that. Then I've actually got, when I was doing this list, I was like, there is actually some albums I like. Now I'm older, I like them more, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it's cheesy shit, but I do have Prince on here.
Yeah.
I think with Prince, sorry, for me, I really like a few of his songs. I think some of them are like ahead of the time. Like I've got on the list of like When Doves Cry. I quite like
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Then like Purple Rain album, like everyone goes on about how good that is, but I don't really recognise many songs off it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think it's weird because when you're talking about, music likes and dislikes, and I've got a massively eclectic sort of music taste. I like anything, and I was never one for actually. I only like music from that particular genre. If I like the song, I like the song. It didn't really matter what genre it came from or what era, sort of thing. So, um, for me, it was more. If I liked the song, I didn't really care who did it. And but I think 80s for me, that I'm going to mention a couple of albums, and you're probably going to shoot me down now because actually they were sort of released in the 70s, but I didn't really hear them and got into them until the 80s. So I'm going to say, it was, and I might mention this before, when it was actually one of our listeners, Dave, and they're basically a couple of Queen albums, and they released mid to late 70s, but obviously I didn't listen to them, so I could throw them in there. It might be cheating a little bit, well, a little bit. I might be sort of cheating quite a lot by mentioning them. But basically there was Night at the Opera and then Day at the Races. They were the two albums really that I listened to in the 80s. But if you're talking about traditional music, not traditional music, but songs in the 80s that were released in the 80s, and I know I don't know necessarily you're a fan, Andy. I suspect you might not be, but Dire Straits, so Brothers in Arms, brilliant album, absolutely brilliant album. So Far Away, Walk Alive, Why Worry, Brothers in Arms, just proper classic tunes that, songs that I really enjoyed. And then the other one really was U2 and the Joshua Tree. U2 were huge then, really, and I suppose maybe the two that you'd know from that are so With or Without You, Where the Streets Have No Names, which the video actually I've sort of got on my memorable videos because it was the one that was done on top of the liquor store. Was it a rip-off? Was it a Beatles one that they copied? Was that it?
The Beatles, they did their last concert per se. Obviously, they stopped touring for I think in the mid to late 60s, but they jumped up on top of a roof, didn't they, and recorded. Well,
Yeah.
they just basically did a free concert for everybody listening. So yeah.
And I know that the U2 one, it was on top of the liquor store. I think it was in Los Angeles somewhere. And I know that obviously it was all unannounced, and then there was a couple of sort of I say back in the day pirate radio stations that mentioned it, and then obviously like hundreds and hundreds of people sort of flocked to this place, could see them setting up, and then the police were setting up like street barricades, and they basically filmed the video, and it was brilliant.
I'm sure if you listen to Purposely Curious podcast, Leone, who's on there quite frequently, he was there that day.
Really?
Yeah, to see. I'm sure. There's something in the back of my mind that tells me that I'm sure he said he was there that day that they recorded that.
Wow, and that would be because again that's in my sort of videos and stuff. But yeah, so for the two sort of Dire Straits and U2, I mean there were loads. I didn't massively listen to it, but my parents used to sell ABBA, and I think I've mentioned it before. So I literally. My mum and dad used to listen to ABBA. They used to listen to loads of country and western, old school country and western. Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, those sort of things. And so growing up, it's really eclectic mix of sort of music. And it's weird because I probably wasn't massively into it. Not like Adam was perhaps in the 90s in terms of the indie stuff that you went through. So, and I know you were massively into that, but I probably wasn't massively one for staying and listening to loads of music. And Andy, you've mentioned that, you did, you go into your room, you'd listen to music and stuff, and that sort of take away escapism or whatever, but I wasn't really one for that. So it was, I suppose, more popular music because I heard it being played on the radio. I was never one for going out and buying loads of albums. So it was more just like the really well-known dead famous songs for me. But growing up, it was influenced a lot by what my mum and dad listened to, and then, like I say, sort of Dave got me listening into Queen, and then I think sort of Adam and Brother Johnny into Guns N' Roses and that sort of stuff. And so yeah, bit of an eclectic mix really for myself. So moving on then, are there any videos. So in terms of sort of 80s video, I mean, Andy, you might not, but 80s videos as such. Anything that you can think of, anything that you sort of
I didn't
come
put
to mind?
any. I didn't put any down because I couldn't really think of any.
So I'm just going to throw. So I've got Aha, so which was Take On Me, which is it was the sort of the cartoon sketch, and then they dive through the cartoon sketch. And then Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, which was that was a proper sort of famous. And then the only other one that got really was Madonna Like a Prayer, because that caused like absolute massive controversy back in the day. Basically, because the Pope, I think, renounced being blasphemous and stuff, and she was burning effigies and crosses and all that sort of stuff. So they sort of stuck in mind, really. In terms of iconic sort of videos, I'm sure there's loads that I've missed out, but they're the ones for me, really.
I think I've just noticed when I look at my list of like songs, I think, to keep in with the video theme, I think half of these are from films. Is why I probably know a lot of these.
Top Gun, yeah.
I know that was too cheesy. That was.
Yeah, not Top Gun.
Go on then. So shout man. So what were a couple of songs you got on that list then?
Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me. Alice Cooper, Poison.
Yeah.
Billy Idol, Rebel Yell. Tom Petty, Free Falling.
I've got that on my list. That's to be fair. I've literally you obviously can't see that, but I've got it on there. Tom Petty, Free Falling, classic song. Classic.
I got a cover band on there. The Smiths. How Soon Is Now?
Cover band. Gee, my goodness! Now, the reason why
we've gone 17 minutes without mentioning them, which is properly good.
Listen, what were the odds on that Andy would mention them first? Eh?
Yeah, hardly. Yeah, absolutely.
The reason why he refers to them as a cover band is some god awful version that Tattoo did of it. And I remember Tattoo. What was their famous song that they did from Eurovision or something like that, wasn't it?
All the things she's it
was.
All the things she said.
Yeah, it was.
Cool,
yeah, they also did a version of How Soon Is Now. Now, I'm not going to labour it too much, but I love the Smiths, and the Smiths were in the 1980s, and to me, it just proves that actually there was good music in the 1980s. Because when you think about 80s music, and to be fair, I think we've managed to dodge the bullet with the old Stock Aitken and Walkman and Kylie Minogue and all that kind of muck. I hate it. It's commercialized. It's produced to make money. There's no artistic quality to it whatsoever. Yeah. I despise it. Yeah. But the Smiths were the opposite of that. And many, many decent bands today will talk about and reference their albums. And I just pulled up one here. Let me see that this is actually a CD version of it. That is The Queen Is Dead, and that was their third album. And for me, it was their best. I absolutely love this album. It very, very rarely isn't on rotation in the car. It's caused my 4-year-old daughter to complain many, many times, saying, "Daddy, I hate Morrissey. Please turn this off."
You know what? She knows the stuff.
But listen, she recognises it. That's it. That seed is planted at some point. At some point, it will grow.
When she gets older and she gets a taste in music, she'll be like, "Yeah, I'll listen to that."
I remember it's because again the list that Ron made. She mentioned the Smiths. She said she listened to the Smiths loads in the early days. Adam and the Ants, Echo and the Bunnymen, Depeche Mode. So slightly more what you would class as absolutely not sort of Britpop, Stock Aitken Waterman sort of thing. And then she said slightly later she would look at sort of the Wonder stuff, The Cure, The Mission, Sisters of Mercy, Susie and the Banshees. So Vron was very, very much sort of the slightly alternative sort of music.
That was the good stuff, though. That was the good stuff. There was actually, and people talk about 80s music, and you do sort of think of that cheese on a stick stuff.
Yeah, you do, yeah.
Well, actually, there was some really, really good music recorded in the 90s. Like I said, The Cure. They did some fantastic. There we go. There's a Cure album out there. This is a collection of their singles, and there's some fantastic songs on there, including Love Cats, In Between Days, Close to Me, and stuff like that, which was all recorded in the 1980s. And fantastic songs.
I wasn't a massive fan, but I mean, Close to Me is I would say an iconic classic song, and most people would know that. I say as well. I wasn't a massive fan of the alternative, but I mean, just looking at Adam and the Ants, sort of never really got it. I suppose you can listen to a couple of songs, but never massively followed that. Smiths, not for me. Yeah, and Adam knows that. not say anti-Smiths, such as just not for me really. And me and Adam have had many a sort of a dispute on sort of the merits of the Smiths and stuff. But I sort of get, so if you were sort of in terms of alternative music, and one of the questions that Vron sort of suggested was, did music influence the way that you behave? Did it influence the way you dress? Did it influence the friendship groups that you sort of you hung around with, and either made friends or lost friends because of it? Because Vron said that she'd not lost friends, but sort of became slightly more detached from certain friends just because of the music that she liked, and they didn't necessarily like that music, and therefore they sort of grew apart. Having said that, she said she then found a fantastic friendship group sort of thing. So did it influence you to that extent necessarily, or was it just you like listening to the music?
I can honestly say it's never cost me friendship. Let's face it, you and I have fundamentally different music tastes.
Wildly different music tastes.
And actually, I think that's a positive thing, because if we agreed on everything, and we agree probably on very little, that we wouldn't have that much to talk about.
Yeah,
we could be lovers.
Is that something
I don't know.
There, or I don't know
where to go with that statement, Andy. I really don't. It's something that's never come up. Oh dear. Over the last 30 plus years. But no, it's certainly never cost me any friendship. When I think about, especially social media nowadays as well, it's made me friends in Germany, Scotland, all over the place, just bonding over our love for Morrissey and the Smiths and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And there's people there that I love hearing from. Don't hear from them very often now, because I probably don't tweet as much as I used to. But when I was regularly tweeting about Morrissey, there's a couple of people that I was regularly chatting to, and that's purely down to that common interest. And that's what's beautiful about music, that it can bring people together. Like I say, sadly, it can divide people as well. Like when you talk about Madonna and that divisive video that she did, don't get me wrong, it was a very, very clever publicity stunt, because as soon as you got the Pope decrying what you're doing, then anybody who's slightly anti-religious is interested in what you're doing. And let's face it, she had a big following anyway.
Yeah.
But no, never cost me any friendships that I can think of, certainly.
So in terms of sort of, and I suppose maybe more relates to sort of Andy, just in the type of music, did that influence perhaps the way that you dressed or the way that you looked? Was it because you were into that slightly alternative, sort of quite heavy rock sort of music? Did that influence you in any way, or?
I don't think so. Like in school, all my friends mainly liked rap sort of thing.
Right.
I like rap as well, but I always just wore jeans and a t-shirt growing up.
Yeah.
And now I just wear t-shirt and shorts. So.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously, you look at some music, and you would look at somebody, and I know not necessarily the 80s, but you look at somebody like Marilyn Manson and the goth movement and all of that sort of stuff, and so does the music influence the way that they dress? Where's the commonality that where you would possibly not necessarily get people that would dress like the Stock Aitken Waterman type acts, but I sort of get the way that you might get like your rockers and your grunge, I suppose, back in the day, and that would influence and your Flock of Seagulls sort of hairstyle and all of that sort of stuff. So
wish.
I presume if you had a core group of friends that liked all the same stuff, then probably you'd probably be more inclined to dress up as it. But interestingly, like I've seen Marilyn Manson a couple of times, and I just turn up in the same stuff I normally wear. Then you get people there like dressed up in like Matrix coats and stuff like full on leather trench coats, spiky shoes, and it's like, I'm sure you don't wear that all the time. Like, I mean, you don't see 100 or however many the MEN can hold, say 50,000 or whatever. You don't see that many people in Manchester, for example, all goffed up.
Yeah. But I do think that whether or not the goth was it 80s, early 90s, 80s maybe, you do see some people, and they will literally go for the black makeup, so the black dress, and that they would go for the sort of dyed hair and the sort of studs and the piercings and all that sort of stuff. And it sort of makes me wonder whether or not was that something that they wanted to do and then searched for a particular type of music that fit the way they wanted to dress, or was it they started listening to music and then dressed in that way? So I suppose the chicken and egg is the what came first, what influenced what. And I don't really know the answer, because I've never really not conformed to various types of dresses as such, but listen to a set of music where I'm going to dress like that. So I'm a bit curious as to what might have influenced what, if you know what I mean.
It's getting out of the decade, but certainly Guns N' Roses, when I was listening to Guns N' Roses, I was permanently dressed in black. And if I wore something that didn't say Guns N' Roses on it, that was a rarity.
Yeah.
I even have like the album cover to Appetite for Destruction tattooed on my back.
Yes,
I do. I was a huge fan of Guns N' Roses. And I have a black rose tattooed at the top of my arm as well, because just in the same place that Axel does it, which, yes, call me a loser, tweet me if you like, it's true. I know it. It's nothing I haven't heard before, so feel free to carry it on. But I love Guns N' Roses, and their first album was released in the 80s.
Yes. It's funny because, oh, go on, you're going to show us a copy of that?
I am, because look at this. This is a very
Appetite for Destruction. Yeah,
this is a rare copy. This is the one that was banned, that the record stores refused to stock. So they then replaced it with the tattoo on the forearm. Axel has the cross on the front with the 5 members on. So yeah, that is a rare copy that I would not part with.
Yeah, it's because when I was thinking about sort of music, I thought Guns N' Roses, but then when you start looking, it's actually a lot of their stuff. So the couple of the albums that I wouldn't necessarily look for would be Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 and that sort of, so then, but I think they were 90s, were they?
91, I think they were.
Were they, or something? Yeah, 1991, 91, 92, whatever it was. So I was like, okay. I didn't massively listen to Appetite for Destruction at the time. It's only really subsequently I haven't listened to Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, and then actually then you go back and you start listening to that. But it wasn't one that I would necessarily listen to.
It's their best work. It's their best stuff. It's just raw. And actually,
do you think they went slightly more commercialized, whereas Appetite for Destruction was more their roots as such, or did they become slightly more mainstream as such?
Well, they've definitely gone mainstream. I don't think that they were commercialized per se, but it was very overproduced. You could tell they had a lot of money to spend on it, and they were literally given what they wanted to and all the studio time that they liked. And that, although there's some great songs there, don't get me wrong, there's some 2 fantastic albums, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, but they were very, very overly produced for me. The beauty of Appetite for Destruction is it's just raw. It's the songs that they were performing in the clubs in LA that they then sat down and recorded them. And it's just fantastic album.
Yeah. So who were? I mean, we've talked a little bit about songs, and we're going to go back to sort of individual songs if you haven't mentioned it. But who were the people that were your particular sort of, I suppose, 80s music icons? And I know, Adam, you're going to say the Smiths and stuff and Morrissey and so on, but who were the icons as such that were around in that era? Maybe the ones that you would listen to, but also you would be appreciative of. You might not necessarily like their music, but oh my God, they are like massive artists. So who would you sort of throw in there?
I mean, funnily enough, you say I am a massive Morrissey fan, a massive Smiths fan, but I didn't listen to them in the 80s. So I'm going to be really honest. I was, being a middle-class white guy, obviously rap music spoke directly to me, and I could entirely relate to that. but no, it was stuff like LL Cool J, and NWA Straight Outta Compton. You know what I mean? That is the 80s. And for me, I still think you can listen. I had it on the other day. Me and Jacob, my little lad, would listen to it. Well, the wife was out. Obviously, she'd have gone mental. He's only 2. He didn't know what was going on.
I was going to say, you better clarify just the fact.
But that, I still think that is one of the best albums ever recorded. You can listen to it now. And again, it's the rawness in it. It's just incredible. It came from their beliefs. It's honest. It's honest, and it's before people get an idea of who they are musically and how big they are. It's just honestly that often the case that the first albums can be the best because of that.
Yeah.
I've got that on my list, and I thought I was going to blow your minds when I said it.
Well, obviously, great minds think alike. It didn't make my list, strangely enough.
And
So
90s, well, 80s and 90s rap is the pinnacle for me. It's like just like the music, like they'll just have this like, if you just listen to like 20 songs and they all have like a similar sort of tune, like instrument to it. I can't think of what it is, but yeah, and the NWA film that came out a few years back is quite good as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like Adam, I think for me, I listen to stuff now and I think, God, I wish I was like a bit older in the 80s to have gone to see it. So like Peter Gabriel, like some of his songs are pretty good.
Yeah.
I got R.E.M. as well.
Well, you see, I looked at REM, but I sort of wonder, and I know they were around in the 80s, but again, you see, the album from REM that I listened to a lot was Automatic for the People, but that was a 90s album, so I was a bit like, I know they were around in the 80s, but the album itself was 90s. I mean, Automatic for the People I think is a brilliant album. It's got loads of decent songs on there, but it's a 90s album, I think, so it wasn't on my list, and I'd love to have put REM on the list, but actually, as I say, that particular album was a little bit later, and I didn't really listen to sort of some of their earlier stuff, so it didn't make my list. Although I do like REM, Michael Stipe, I do like them.
For me,
go on.
I was just say he's a very good friend of Morrissey, but carry on.
Okay, I might have gone off him. No, I'm joking.
I was going to say, I think most of my list is literally, I've got a list of artists, a list of songs, and just a couple of albums, because I don't really know when the albums were, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Apart from, I had Straight Outta Compton, Thriller for Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And Tears for Fears as well. But song-wise, I wrote loads of songs.
Yeah.
Like Stevie Nicks, a couple of their songs are pretty good.
Yeah.
Simple Minds as well.
I mean, you go, and it's a bit like when we did the TV one, the movies one. The more you start talking about it, the more you start thinking, oh yeah, and the more you start, because you go down the route of Madonna, Michael Jackson, Spandau Ballet, Duran Duran, Wham, that were, and some of them were obviously very sort of commercialised, and they did come from that sort of Stock Aitken Waterman type sort of pop production line, Kylie and Jason and all of that sort of stuff that possibly a bit later, but but you start thinking. So I personally, one of my favourite songs is Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. I love that song. The storytelling in that song is phenomenal in terms of, and I know there's been various covers and this, that and the other, but her version of that song was fantastic.
I think she's quite underrated. Like when you think of, if you mention a list of her songs, people associate them songs more with the people who covered it rather than her.
Yeah.
Like Fast Car was a brilliant song.
Fast Car is when you start thinking about the actual lyrics and what it means and effectively the sacrifice that person went through, you just think, wow, what? And it goes back to, I suppose, what Addy's saying in terms of maybe Morrison and Smith, just proper raw storytelling, sort of, no commercial aspect, no big production. It's just, you can imagine Tracy Chapman effectively gigging with that song. Do you know what I mean? And that for me, so that was one that made my list, and for ages it was one of my favourite songs, and it still is. It's one of those I can listen to it sort of over and over. But I'd got sort of Tom Petty, Free Falling, Run DMC, Walk This Way, and that would go into the classic sort of video. They're coming down the steps. They got the massive Adidas with the tongs out and all. They proper giving it all. So that was. But again, it's weird because I wouldn't listen to really any other stuff that they did. It's just that song struck me, and I like listening to it, and it was brilliant. But in terms of would I listen to a whole album of theirs? No, probably not. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Relax, absolutely. So that made my list just in terms of just an iconic song. And I know there was controversy again, and it got banned for a while and stuff from the airways and radios and stuff. But would I listen to a whole album of theirs? No, probably not. Two Tribes was a decent song.
I was going to say Two Tribes, dude, because for me that was American football. Channel 4 when they had that back on in the 80s when last time Bears won anything.
Whoa! The mid-80s when the Bears were good, you mean?
Yeah, basically.
And don't even get me started on Andy bloody Dalton. I don't even want to. That's a whole different podcast. Yeah, we're all looking for Deshaun Watson. We end up with Andy Dalton. No disrespect, Andy, if you're listening, by the way.
No. Come on, disrespect. Former Bengals. You can say what you like about the guy.
But but to try and it's absolutely weird because when I was thinking about 80 songs, and I actually kept holding out for a hero because I remember Channel 4 did that as one of their. So when they did Channel 4 back in the day when they covered the NFL, and I think it's something like John Riggins or something. Did he play for Washington or something? And it goes. And then all of a sudden John Riggins will come bursting through like the sort of screen. You're like, whoa, what's this sort of thing? So that. But again, that was back when the Bears were cool and they were decent. And
you've been holding out for a hero ever since.
but yeah, absolutely. Because we had loads of heroes, actually, we actually want to see.
Oh yeah, phenomenal team that was.
Yeah, it was a great team. So yeah, in terms of songs that are like Toto, Africa. I mean, if you can get a lyric that says "Rising Lank and Empress above the Serengeti" into a song, then that for me is genius. But just certain songs that you listen to and they just make you sing along. Do you know? And you can say that for any era, but just back in the day, songs that. So Peter Gabriel, I don't know if it was in the 80s or not, but Salisbury Hill was one of my really favourite songs. I loved that song. Obviously I'm a bit of a Billy Joel fan, so stuff that he did through the 80s and stuff. And Adam's pulling a face, so I know he's not a massive fan.
I don't. Some of his stuff's okay. Actually, the last time I spoke out about Billy Joel, I got a stinging text off my brother John saying, "No, dude, no, I'm not standing for that. Billy Joel was a legend. He's done some great stuff. So I'm going to hold off again. I don't want another them text messages."
So, go on then, Andy. We've looked at who would be your. Yeah, I suppose, and I've thrown this out, so you might need sort of a couple of minutes to think. Who would be your guilty pleasure then in terms of an 80s? Somebody, and perhaps Adam's mentioned Nick Kershaw already, so yeah. But who would be your sort of guilty pleasure? So somebody that actually, if they came on, you might listen to, but you wouldn't really ever admit it as such? Or have you got anybody?
I don't think I've got too much shame, to be honest. I'll just say it. I thought UB40 did a. Like Red Wine came out in 80s, didn't it? Quite like that song.
Yeah.
See, I'm not really a Dio fan, and he did Holy Diver. It's not too bad of a song.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've really. Maybe Prince. We'll go with Prince.
Yeah. I'd go on guilty pleasure then.
Strawberry Switchblade Since Yesterday. I tell you what, I love that song. Even now, if it comes on, which doesn't very often, apart from sadly on one of my playlists on Spotify, if it comes on, I can't switch that one off, dude. It's just an absolute jam. I don't know what it is about that song, but it's bewitching.
Wow. See, it's because.
Yeah, Google that one.
Google the Scottish new wave pop duo.
Exactly. If that doesn't sell it to you.
just literally just that one line. You see, for me, there's a couple for me. So Wham. So Club Tropicana is just, if that comes on, it doesn't matter where I'm listening to it. I just end up sort of Club Tropicana, drinks are free. Yeah, and then literally I just end up start singing it. And so for me, that's a bit of a guilty pleasure, if I'm honest. I
could picture you toe tap into that in your budgie smugglers from Margarita.
Bright green Speedos.
I'd have preferred to be, I don't know when it was an 80s or an 90s, but I'd have preferred the sort of Faith one when he's got that decent sort of like jacket on, he's sort of strumming away on the guitar. So I don't know if it's 80s or 90s now, but I don't know.
His album Faith was out that 80s, wasn't it?
Is that, yeah?
I said that was 90s.
Yeah, you see, I wasn't sure, so I'll bow to Andy's superior sort of music knowledge as such.
He loves you, George Michael. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Guilty pleasure, George. Yeah, no, it is because he was a phenomenal singer. I say when he was with Wham, but then some of the solo stuff that he did, and his as a singer, his range and the type of songs he did, Careless Whisper is an all-time absolute banger. It's a classic. know.
It's a bloody awful song. But what I will say is stuff like that. When you hear it, I don't like it, and a lot of the Stock Aitken and Walkman stuff like that, I don't like it. But I will leave it on because it was always playing somewhere during my childhood, and it takes me back to simpler times when you weren't paying your mortgage. You know, you didn't have to think about cash. It was just what you come on.
So you mentioned that, and we might have sort of covered this in a bit of a previous one, possibly. Are there any particular songs that hold any particular memories? So is there, and I know it's hard because you might talk about the whole genre and the whole era. Are there any songs that you could sort of think back and think, right, I remember sort of doing that or listening to that, or is there anything that sort of kicks sparks off a memory, or if you hear a particular song, you think, I remember that? And I don't know. I mean, I've sprung it on you, sort of thing. So
I can probably Rebel MC, Street Tough. Do you remember that bad boy?
Rebel MCs.
That's another one for you to Google. MDG was, and that is that me and Martin Hancock listening to that one. And Martin like really was the guy who introduced me to rap. That wasn't a great example of rap, really. Street Tough by Rebel MC. But yeah, when we were kids, we got our hands on some fireworks and do something stupid like that. I'm sure we were listening to that first, drinking a can of Castlemaine. His old man had bought us from the off license.
Super Extra or something.
Oh no, they're not back in those days. You know, I was about 15 or 16. I couldn't have taken that, and it put me on my back now. Probably that stuff.
So Andy, then sort of music memories as such. It doesn't have to be maybe a specific memory, but if you've got one there, yeah, go with it.
I think when I was like 10 or whatever, I was living in a pub. It was pretty decent, but that was in the 90s. But there was some of the songs just remind me of that happier time, like playing pool and stuff. But there's one song that stands out on here, Judas Priest, Breaking the Law. It always takes me back to Beavis and Butthead. And then when I was a kid,
breaking the law.
And I was watching an episode of Beavis and Butthead the other day. I was just like, oh my god! Like when I was growing up, I was like, this is amazing. Just sat there like, well, not even smoking anything, but looking like a stoner probably. It's like, yeah. I don't know. I look at like some of the people here, and they probably remind me of more modern films now because they started to use a lot of these songs.
Yeah.
Like Pour Some Sugar on Me, Def Leppard, and Poison, Alice Cooper. There's a lot of newer like dance films, don't they? They sort of slip these songs in.
And that sort of almost as if you read my mind sort of segues me into, so what were and we've talked about 80s TV and 80s movies, but what were the sort of music from the 80s films, and I won't mention the soundtrack to Top Gun because I've mentioned that before, but what with it, because the one for me that stands out, and I don't know whether I mentioned this in the movies one, was Beverly Hills Cop, and you got Hal Fulton and the Axel F, and you and that just proper just takes me back. So what were the
Glenn Fry as well? The heat is on. That was from that, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, it was. The heat is on. It's on the streets. It's brilliant. Yeah, I'm not going to sing every one, by the way. But so what were the?
No, go on.
And I know we mentioned 80s TV and 80s films, but what was the sort of the theme tunes or the music of the 80s that you associate with certain films, or what was the one? I know crossover between what we did last week and this week, but go on, shout me out sort of an 80s theme
Police
tune
Academy.
that then became.
I can't even remember the tune.
I've got the tune in my head, dude, but that's one for Gaz to do. That is one I imagine he has in his repertoire.
You know what? I actually can't place it at the moment. You're gonna have to sing it to me.
Lord Almighty, I apologise. I don't have
no,
voice or a doodling voice. I tell you one, I'll give you a good one with a great soundtrack. I think you mentioned Simple Minds earlier. Have we mentioned Simple Minds? The Breakfast Club. Don't you forget about me. Now that is a tune, and that's
one of my favourite songs, guys.
Yeah, great song, great film. Actually, we never mentioned that last week, but I love The Breakfast Club. Yeah, great film.
Yeah, it's weird because cheesy theme tunes, and we mentioned it, so thing. But Magnum and Dallas and all that, but they weren't really crossover songs that then got released. I know that, and I mentioned the Beverly Hills Cop and Harold Faltermeyer because that actually got released effectively as a single, and people were buying that, and it was like actually it's just a theme tune from the film.
It was top 10 though, wasn't it? It went top 10.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it was absolutely, and I don't know whether or not. And I want to say the Dukes of Hazzard maybe was as well, but I don't know how popular that got, or if it even was. But I just vaguely remember people buying that. Obviously, and then they would buy. They asked, "Oh, can we get the song?" And then I'm almost certain they released it. And if anyone is out there and I'm talking absolute bubbles, then obviously let me know. But I'm sure that they released that as a single, and I don't know how successful it was.
It's definitely on one of Waylon Jennings' albums. I know that for sure.
Right. Okay.
I have that on one of my Spotify playlists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Is that your country and western Spotify playlist?
It is. Check it out. Redneck Beans. Have a look on Spotify. It's absolute humdinger.
Absolutely. So, going back to sort of school, I say school for me and Ad, mates that you mates that you got, did your mates have the same type of music interests as you growing up? Or, I mean, we possibly obviously became pretty good mates sort of later through the school life, but sort of formative years, let's say, sort of late primary school, early secondary school, did you gravitate towards people that would listen to the same type of music, or was it more the same type of film, or was it just people that you were in your form? Was music an influence in terms of the friendship group you had, or?
Maybe actually it was the other way around. The friendship had sometimes an influence on my music taste. Like I say, I mentioned I was listening to rap music, and it was Knocking Around with Martin Hancock back in the day, and it was him who got me into that. And that's another one of the albums I listen to nowadays. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's here. I've got the vinyl version here in front of me.
Dude, I seriously, that reminds me of you.
De La Soul.
Seriously,
I have a T-shirt this one. De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising. Just an absolutely great album. Actually, probably one of the worst produced records of all time, because the sound quality in it is absolutely atrocious. They've done wonders to get it on CD nowadays. It's much better. But yeah, when you played it back in the day, it was bloody awful. But just some great stuff. But it was different because a lot of the stuff from rap music back then was starting to get a little bit angry and a little bit about the streets. And this, it wasn't hip hop; it was hippie hop. And that, that back in the day, I loved it. I loved it.
So, what about yourself then, Andy? In terms of sort of mates at school, was it? And I know you said that you would listen to quite a lot of music, sort of, I say, on your own and stuff. But was there a group of mates that you all listened to the same thing, or did you all have quite a different mix? Or was it quite an eclectic mix of sort of mates and music, sort of back in the day?
I think predominantly my music is rock, but then I do listen to a lot of random rap stuff as well. But I think with my friends is mainly rap stuff, like Dr. Dre. It's a bit newer than the 80s, obviously, but Dr. Dre, Will Smith, his early stuff's pretty good. Eminem and all that sort of thing. So it's a bit weird
because it is, it as I say, go back to what I said a minute ago. It's and it goes back to what you just said about you and Martin, sort of thing. Did you gravitate towards people that listen to the same type of music, or was the friendship group that you were in, did that then influence your taste? Because I certainly think, from my point of view, obviously becoming mates with that, and sort of, I suppose, late 80s, mid to late 80s, not giving away too much of our age, actually probably more late 80s. I do think becoming friends with that massively influenced some of my music, because you went through very much the sort of the indie phase, and we're going slightly off sort of decade now, but you influenced me in terms of Stone Roses, Spiral Carpets, The Farm, Soup Dragons, all that sort of thing. And whilst I couldn't listen to perhaps a whole album of all of their stuff, there were songs that I was like, actually, you know what? There's some absolute tunes now, and you Happy Monday, Stone Roses now, and now I listen to them like, actually, they were decent songs. Do you know what I mean?
And many of them released in the 1980s, and this is what's forgotten. Happy Mondays, they're early. They go back to the mid 80s. There's one of their early ones, Happy Mondays. So Rope for Luck, Hallelujah. Some of their best work was done in the 1980s. But you mentioned probably one of the greatest albums for me ever recorded, and it was 80s. It wasn't quite as 80s as Andy Simpson's message. The other one was December, but it was 1989, April 1989. The Stone Roses, for me, one of the best albums ever recorded. It's up there with Morrissey and the Smiths for me. My
Just
brother,
read the back up there. What's some of the songs on that then?
so side one, you got I Want to Be Adored, She Bangs the Drums, Waterfall, Don't Stop, Bye Bye Bad Man. And then side two, Elizabeth My Dear, Song for My Sugar Spun Sister, Made of Stone, Shoot You Down, This Is the One, and I Am the Resurrection. And so me and my brother-in-law Neil, he loves the Stone Roses. He loves the Stone Roses like I love the Smiths. But we can't disagree when he tells me how great this album is. I can't disagree with him.
And that's because you look at the Stone Roses. Oh, I say you think about the Stone Roses, and you think about some of the song titles, and you think, what? And all of them came from that one album. Do you know what I mean? It was like, because some of the songs that you just mentioned there, you're like, that was almost like a greatest hits. Do you know what I mean? Because that, and I didn't realise that all of them came from that one album. That would have been for me like, well, that's a greatest hits. That's a compilation sort of thing. So, but yeah, so I think, and again, sort of, being born in 73, so if I would get back to the sort of late 80s, what we sort of, 15, 16 sort of thing. And I think, whilst I didn't really listen to music that much other than the popular stuff, started to sort of get friends with Ad and stuff, and spend a bit more time around at Ad's house and this, that, and the other. And it was like, listening to Adam listen to music then massively influenced what I then listened to. And I've sort of said, the slightly Indian, then the Guns N' Roses, and that actually, I suppose when I look back and thinking early 80s, me growing up, I probably wouldn't have listened to that type of music. But actually, having a mate, having other people that definitely influenced me. And, I've got songs on my playlist now. My two daughters listen to it now. Who's this? And I say, and obviously clean versions and stuff. So you look at some of the indie stuff, or particularly some of the Guns N' Roses stuff. I mean, I would never let them listen to Get in the Ring sort of thing. But and I don't know whether that was an 80s or probably 90s actually. Yeah, 90s that was. Yeah, so I'd never. Although if you haven't listened to it, Google the lyrics because it's impressive. So I'd never let them listen to sort of that and stuff. But my music taste is absolutely eclectic. And she, who's this? And I'll say, give them a name, Tracy Chapman or Peter Gabriel. And it's like, when was that released? 86, 87. Like, I remember when that was re-released. And as you said, Andy, it's the cover versions that people perhaps learn and know about and hear, and then you think, I remember when that was an original back in the day. And you're like, no, and you know, no, it isn't. It's like, well, yeah, I could play it to you if you wanted to. So I think, back in whether it's the 70s or the 80s and stuff. So, but for me, I absolutely started listening more to music, having become friends effectively with Ad sort of later on through school. So for me, it definitely influenced. And then obviously Adam's brother, sort of middle brother John, started listening to sort of music, and I won't say we now have a similar sort of taste in me now, because obviously we don't. I detest the Smiths and Morrissey, and Ad loves him, and Ad would detest a lot of the stuff. So I only have to mention sort of Phil Collins or whoever, and he's like shaking his head. So but yeah. So but for me, it was more popular back in the day, but I never felt as I wanted necessarily to conform to a particular type of genre, so never really sort of fell into, I'll only listen to that type of music. So Andy, go on. So I don't know whether you've got any other songs sort of left on your list. You've probably got a few that we haven't mentioned.
Let's take a look.
Because I know you've done extensive research for this.
I've got one.
Go on.
Rio Speedwagon, Keep on Loving You.
Oh yeah, Rio
Speedwagon,
yeah. I just think of that from the film Crank. I think this might be the second one or first. I can't remember which one.
and it's weird because I think the 80s was this sort of I won't say this cock rock as such, but it's like the soft rock, that type of
glam rock. I
glam rock was sort of I suppose was it like late 70s, but like the soft rock, I suppose a bit, maybe not Aerosmith or Def Leppard, but like Marillion. Although having said that, Kaylee is was it Marillion that did Kaylee? Was that 80s maybe? Was it? So that's a decent song, but couldn't listen to a lot of their stuff. Do you know what I mean? So, Ad, do you want to mention any others that you sort of that are on your list that we perhaps haven't covered?
Well, I'll chuck one last one out on there. And actually, just out of curiosity, see if Andy's a big fan of these, because it does fit quite heavily into the old rock category. So probably most famous for having Mike Patton as the lead singer, but back in the day, Faith No More with Chuck Mosley. So this is another one I wouldn't part with, because this is actually really quite nice. So this is We Care a Lot. It's the EP. And if you're watching on YouTube, have a look at that bad boy. That is a gem. Were you a big fan of Faith No More, Andy?
Yeah, I was supposed to see him last year, but thanks to COVID.
Yeah, thank you, COVID. Yeah. But yeah,
I only got into them about 3 years ago. But
amazing. I love Faith No More. Mainly the Mike Patton stuff, to be fair. But I had to dig this one out, because this was 1985. There's some We Care a Lot, which was re-recorded actually with Mike Patton singing. But Chuck Mosley, who was the lead singer back then, who passed away I think last year. So R.I.P. Chuck Mosley.
Wow.
I'll just throw another song in quickly.
Go on then. Yeah, absolutely.
Jane's Addiction. Jane says.
Oh, Been Caught Stealing. Absolute humdinger of a tune, that one.
It amazes me that from the 80s.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, I don't know. I can't say that.
Made a notable appearance in the film Cape Fear, the remake of that with Robert De Niro, when Robert De Niro played
okay.
Max Cayley. Yeah, like Juliette Lewis, who plays the daughter in that, is listening to Guns N' Roses, but Jane's Addiction's video, Been Caught Stealing, is playing in the background on the TV. The video it's playing where it's got some woman stealing a watermelon, shoving it up. So I guess I do remember some of the videos from the 80s after all.
Absolutely. Knowledge, that is kid. I'm impressed with that.
I do have a list of 3 bands I won't mind mentioning as well.
Yeah, go on then. Crack on.
So these formed in the 80s. 2 of them I don't think released anything in the 80s, but Alice in Chains is like one of my all-time favourites. Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Just still going. And Soundgarden as well.
Oh, okay.
You like them much?
Soundgarden, yeah.
So, you know what? The only one, the one song that I remember from Soundgarden, I think I don't know whether it's Ad or John. Was it Black Hole Sun? Is that Soundgarden?
Yeah, that is.
1995. That one.
Yeah. So, but that's possibly the only one that I could maybe name you from that.
We should repeat this trilogy with the 1990s at some point, not necessarily for the next 3 weeks. Maybe a bit enough for our reminiscing. But
I'll find it a bit easier.
Yeah, we'll
stuff you can remember.
Like pensionable age, and Andy's just coming into his own now. Absolutely, yeah.
So I suppose one other band actually is the old Wild Stallions as well.
Wild Stallions. You check out Andy's t-shirt.
You can lead that trilogy though, dude. You can do the 90s, and we'll do like 90s music, 90s movies, 90s TV. Because I think maybe if that's what we think, we might do a couple of sort of theme-based sort of weeks as such, and we might do sort of similar sort of themes for the next couple of weeks and stuff. So that might be decent. Obviously not next week or the next 2 or 3, but maybe down the line we do a sort of almost like a trilogy of decades and eras and stuff. So that might be quite cool.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I like that idea.
There'll be a few surprises, I think. Like we found with the 80s. I think there'll be a few stuff in there. But oh my god!
And it is weird because there'll be loads that Whitney Houston, and I'm not saying I was a massive fan of her music, but she was huge, massive, and there's just massively iconic people in the 80s. But you could say the same for the 90s, and we might go down like the Oasis and the Blur and that type sort of stuff. But you go down different eras, and you think, yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, we sort of either A, forgotten about them or B, not mentioned them. But yeah. Right, so I think coming up to an hour or so, which has sort of flown by, really. So I don't know whether or not there's any sort of final thoughts. I have to sound like Jerry Springer then. But if there's any final thoughts, I know you're absolutely itching to show us another couple of albums that you've got.
It's just one last one, and it's not so much an album. It's not so much an album, although I'm going to show you. It's an EP, and it's John Peel's got to be worth a mention because for me, he was probably more the '90s, but this is the Peel sessions of the Happy Mondays, and he was a guy who championed great music back in the day, and I think nowadays it is commercial. It is an industry, and don't get me wrong, it was back then. But there was dissenting voices like the likes of John Peel, again, God rest his soul, who would come out and champion the underdog and actually say this is fantastic music. It wasn't just Happy Mondays, the likes of Gang of Four and other people like that. He used to champion some fantastic music. So definitely, I just think John Peel definitely worth a mention.
Yeah. It was something I popped on my notes, and it wasn't sort of John Peel, and it's slightly Stock Aitken Waterman sort of going down that line. But I was just trying to think. So the Hitman and Her, do you remember that? Do you remember that? Because I think that was 80s.
Was that Michaela Strachan?
It was Pete Waterman, I think, and Michaela Strachan that did it, and it was just like, and Andy, you're looking massively puzzled there, but it was basically they went around to various, and it was Mr. Smith's in Warrington that was the main, but they used to tour various nightclubs and stuff, and they basically just play, I suppose, slightly more alternative sort of tunes and stuff, but it's shown on TV and stuff, and you got various dancers and stuff. So that was an 80s memory. And then the only other one I want to mention really was when you had sort of Top of the Pops, and then you had like the top 40 playing on the radio. And I never really did this, but chat to Jenny, my wife, she said she used to do this. Was like you'd have like a tape recorder, and what they do is they play all the songs, and you'd literally like record the top 40. So you'd like when they started playing the songs, you'd record it. And then when the song stopped, you'd pause it, and then the DJ stopped. And now in at number 37 is, and then you start it again. Literally, you just listen to the top 40 for like 2 hours. Then you'd have the top 40 on the playlist, but it was old tapes and stuff. So that was a sort of proper 80s memory, not necessarily for me because I didn't really do that, but certainly for Jenny, she was like, I remember sort of listening there on a Sunday night. Used to play that top 40 and stuff. So that was a bit of a sort of bit of a memory that she said that she had. So.
I used to do that and I loved it. I used to love my little Walkman, like little tape player.
Yeah. So back in the day, you got your tape. Literally, you'd be like, oh, okay, I'm going to tape it. The proper 80s comment, that is, isn't it? No. So, yeah, anyway, so I think we're probably slightly over the hour mark now. So, so wrapping up, guys, do you want to just sort of say goodbyes, sort of final thoughts? Ad, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this. And it's actually... like Andy says, I'm not going to say it's made it easier, but it's certainly more comfortable talking about something that we've continued over a 3-week period, with the different stuff things that we're familiar with. And hopefully the listeners out there who are familiar with this, and if you're not, then hopefully it's spurred you on to go and have a look and find something a little bit different and maybe a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And if you haven't gone out and listened to the Smiths off of the back of this, then we have wasted our time.
Andy, I'll let you respond to that.
I'm genuinely surprised it wasn't a Smiths episode, to be honest. But I'll tell you what, the subliminal messaging's working because I've been listening to him a bit more, and my missus is a bit annoyed.
You need to cut that out right now.
So if we go to Scotland, we can just pull it all on. Play the old discography or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
No, let's not.
No, it's been good. Hopefully, some people enjoyed what we said and opened their mind a little bit and listened to that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if there's any listeners out there, obviously, just like sort of Ron has, sort of get in touch. Let us know your thoughts. Is there a particular topic you want us to talk about? If that's not necessarily the case, and if you've listened to an episode and you want to give us some feedback, all the usual sort of social media platforms, then get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, as we always say. Keep trying to spread the word of TBR. We're in how many countries now, Ad? Is it 30?
We're not saying. Dude, we're not saying because of competition.
Oh no, we said that first. We said that first time, didn't we? Yeah, I think we said that last week. So
it was 31 last week. How many?
That's okay then. I'm glad I said 31. Then it might be more now, but I'm glad I said that. You well reminded me. Yeah, who knows? So yeah, we keep spreading love and all that. Loved hosting this one, and look forward to the next one. So without further ado, keep listening to decent music, and make sure that doesn't include Morrissey. Out.
I'll edit that out.
Make sure you edit it to say, make sure you listen to Morrissey.
Morrissey, yeah.